Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. Let's tackle today's Supreme Court order temporarily staying or stopping the Department of Justice from having to turn over to the Congress all of the Bob Mueller grand jury materials so that Congress can actually get a full picture of all of the crimes Donald Trump committed. This is an ongoing, dangerous game of hide and seek with the truth that Bill Barr's Department of Justice is playing, trying to keep the truth about presidential crimes and misconduct from the Congress and from the American people. So let's do a quick recap. The Mueller investigation, of course, issued a lengthy report. Volume 1 of the report was all about coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia, more than 140 contacts between campaign members and Russians. Volume 2 was primarily about presidential crimes and misconduct, and it documented as many as 10 felony obstruction of justice offenses by Donald Trump. Let's talk about just one so we can recall the flavor of Trump's misconduct. If you'll remember, Don McGahn, the former White House counsel, was directed by Donald Trump to fire Bob Mueller while Bob Mueller was investigating Donald Trump. To Don McGahn's credit, he said, "Mr. President, I'm not going to do that. It could be perceived as obstructing justice." Donald Trump then said, "Okay, if you won't do it, I'm directing you to lie to everybody and tell people I never ordered you to fire Bob Mueller. By the way, I want you to create a false document saying I never ordered you to fire Bob Mueller." You know, this is just one of the many felony federal obstruction of justice offenses Donald Trump committed. This is the information that Bill Barr's Department of Justice wants to continue to hide from Congress and from the people in this dangerous game of hide and seek with the truth. So the matter has been litigated, and the last court opinion was from the DC Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, and they, not surprisingly, ordered the Department of Justice to turn over all of the Mueller grand jury materials to Congress. And here is just a little bit of what Judge Judith Rogers wrote in ordering the Department of Justice to turn the materials over to Congress. She said, and I quote, "Courts must take care not to second-guess the manner in which the House of Representatives plans to proceed with its impeachment investigation or interfere with the House's sole power of impeachment," close quote. Therefore, Department of Justice, turn it over. Well, not surprisingly, the Department of Justice ran to the Supreme Court and said, "Please don't make us turn these materials over. We want to appeal this matter to the Supreme Court." And here is a little bit of what the Department of Justice argued in trying to convince the Supreme Court to put a temporary stay in place. And it was authored by the Solicitor General, Noel Francisco. The Solicitor General is the person in the Department of Justice who essentially takes the lead on Supreme Court litigation and argues cases in front of the Supreme Court. And what the Solicitor General argued in part in trying to have the Supreme Court put a hold on the Department of Justice's responsibility to turn this stuff over to Congress, he said, and I quote, "The House already has impeached the president. The Senate already has acquitted him. Therefore, Congress has no immediate need for this information," close quote. So Congress and the people have no immediate need for information about the felony obstruction of justice crimes the President of the United States has committed. And the Solicitor General actually cites the results of the Senate impeachment trial in support of trying to convince the Supreme Court not to make the Department of Justice turn this stuff over. A Senate trial, I shouldn't even call it a trial, a Senate matter, hearing, proceeding that was rigged. That's not a word I use often, but it was rigged because Mitch McConnell didn't let a single witness testify or a single piece of evidence be admitted, a single document to be examined. That wasn't a trial. It was a sham. But that is one of the reasons the Department of Justice says, you see, Congress no longer needs this information because the president was already acquitted by the Senate. Well, the Supreme Court bit, at least temporarily. And today they issued this one-paragraph order. I'm not going to read it because it's really a whole lot of legal jargon, but let me tell you what essentially the Supreme Court has said today. They basically said, we will grant the temporary stay. So at the moment, the Department of Justice doesn't have to turn all of the Mueller grand jury materials over to Congress. And we're going to give the Department of Justice until June 1st to file what's called a petition for a writ of certiorari, fancy term for to file an appeal with the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court will decide whether to hear the appeal or not. If they decide to hear the appeal, then they will keep that stay in place, the status quo. They will temporarily pause the requirement that the DOJ turn all these materials over to Congress until they can hear and decide the case, which will take months and months and months. And they also say if the Department of Justice does not file an appeal by June 1st, then the materials automatically must go over. But folks, we all know in this ongoing dangerous game of hide and seek with the truth, Bill Barr's Department of Justice will file an appeal by June 1st. So here's what I'll say, folks. There will be stumbles and setbacks and stutter steps on the road to justice. And Bill Barr will continue to play this deadly game of hide and seek with the truth, trying to keep the truth from Congress and from the American people about the crimes of Donald Trump. But we, the people, will continue to walk the road of justice. And I believe to my core that we will get there together because justice matters. It matters. Folks, as always, please stay safe. Please stay coronavirus free. And I look forward to talking with you again tomorrow.